There are so many rapture theories and predictions circulating around the internet these days, and many of them are based on a variety of scriptures, including Matthew chapter 24. But what if this chapter isn't even describing the event that we know as the rapture? What if we've been taught wrong about this passage? In this video, my desire is to correct our understanding of the rapture by looking at one main misconception. Throughout the rest of this series, we'll look at the other misconceptions. But today, we're going to look at this misconception that Jesus is talking about two separate events in Matthew chapter 24. But let's dive in and I'll show you what I mean. The question I get all the time is, do you believe in the rapture? And it depends on what you mean. I've said that over and over. But the question isn't, do I believe in the rapture, but do I believe we meet the Lord and are caught up with him in the air when he returns to establish new creation? Yeah, I do. I just don't believe Matthew 24 is necessarily talking about this the way many Christians think. I believe the rapture and the final coming of Jesus to usher in new creation in the kingdom eternally. Those are the same exact events. So here's the third misconception in this series of misunderstandings about end times and the rapture. If we're going to base any of this theology, or primarily on Matthew 24, Jesus is talking about the destruction of the temple in one section of Matthew 24. Let me open it up for you. But then things shift at some point, and he begins talking about the end of the world. That's one of the big misconceptions. Again, it's that all of Matthew 24 is not all about one key event that happened in AD 70, which is the destruction of the temple by Rome. And I'll tell you what, if it's true that Jesus is talking about two separate events, the end of the temple and then the end of the world towards the end of Matthew 24, and if we're waiting for some dual fulfillment of these prophecies, which is view number one, or if we're waiting for that second separate event, the end of the world, then you might say there's a logical reason to conclude that Jesus could be describing and is describing the rapture here, because these things have not yet happened. But if they have all been fulfilled in AD 70, and there is no dual fulfillment coming in the future, which I can't fully disprove. I'm not living in the future to know whether or not any of Jesus' prophecies in Matthew 24 have a dual fulfillment. But if they have all been fulfilled, then this leaves no possibility for the rapture to be anywhere in this passage. Meaning that because these things have happened and we have not been raptured, the idea is we're waiting for that event and all these different things surrounding the rapture, and then we'll be taken to the Lord. But if they've all happened, then we're not waiting for anything because all this stuff has already happened. And again, many will build their rapture theology not only on Matthew 24, but including Matthew 24, and they'll pinpoint the timing, the events, the setting, the political atmosphere from this chapter and other synoptic accounts with other scriptures kind of thrown in the mix. But I just don't think that's correct. To be very honest and transparent, I'm still working through this myself, and I have been for years. But I'd just like to share where I'm at right now in my understanding to help you guys along your journey. So last year in Matthew 24, in my Matthew 24 series, I had a fairly different position than I do now, and I'm still working through that, honestly. But I lean more towards, I'll get to this in a minute, but I already laid out how in Matthew 24, the data is organized differently than what we see in Luke's account of this same discourse. Many people either don't know this, or they read into this the way that I used to. Meaning in Luke 17, we have one portion of Matthew 24, and then in Luke 21, we have the other end times portion of Matthew 24. And because of that, it's easy to say, therefore, Jesus is talking about two separate events, which is what I used to think. And I could come back to this view later on and be like, you know what, I was right. But for now, what I stated in that series, you can go watch that last year, is that I believe Matthew 24 is talking about end times of the world and then the end of the temple, especially considering how Luke 17 and Luke 21 separate it. But at this point in my studies, and I could be wrong, I'm starting to not believe that. I'm not entirely convinced that that's true, but as of right now, I'm leaning more towards the idea that Matthew 24 is actually describing one singular, exact same event. Luke 17 and Luke 21 are describing the exact same event, the destruction of Jerusalem. Not the end of the world and the destruction of Jerusalem, but the end. of that temple era and that age of the sacrificial system under the old covenant with the temple, that comes to an end with the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. I believe that singular event is what Jesus refers to in Luke 17 and 21. But I want to give you a few reasons why, so you can think through this yourself, why people often will go, well, there's a dual nature to this prophecy. Or, hey, I think this Matthew 24 section right here, if we go all the way up to verse 35 and before is talking about the destruction of the temple. Verse 36 and on is talking about the end of the world. I want to give you a few reasons why I used to think that and why many people think that. It's a reasonable conclusion to come to. I just don't hold to it. Especially if we're going to be consistent with Matthew's writing style, he's organizing his data topically for his audience. And so Matthew 24, if he's combining the two discourses that are found in Luke 17 and Luke 21, likely it's because he knows this is referring to the same topic and event, and his data is organized by topic. That's where I stand right now. I could be wrong, and I'm still learning and growing, but let me give you a few examples of why I used to believe Jesus is talking about two separate events. Because if I haven't been clear up to this point, I'm sorry for rambling. This is just me being honest. I don't want to be so assertive and certain about my stance, but for now, verse 1 through 35, some say that's the destruction of Jerusalem. Verse 36 and on, that's the end of the world, right? And here's a few reasons why I used to think this and others do. Number one, it's because of the three questions the disciples ask in the beginning. Right here, they say, and I'm going to unhighlight this so you're not confused. Actually, it's highlighted pretty well. The disciples come to him privately, and in blue, here's one question. When will these things be? The destruction of the temple, right? What will be the sign of your coming? That's inquiry number 2. And what is the sign of the end of the age? That's inquiry number 3. And because of that, because people assume, well, the disciples are asking about 3 different things. Or for some people, they think the disciples are asking about 2 different things. Because that's true, they go, well, Jesus' answer throughout Matthew 24 is going to be answering separately those questions. So the first portion, Jesus will answer, when will the destruction of the temple be, right? In the second portion, he'll talk about the sign of his coming, and then he'll talk about the end of the age. Or for others who hold to more of, the disciples are talking about 2 events, the destruction of the temple and then the end of the world. They say Jesus is going to be answering the first question in the first section of Matthew 24, and then he'll talk about his coming and the end of the world in the second portion, right? And we'll get into these 3 questions in the next session, but that's one reason why people will kind of divide Matthew 24 the way that they do. Another reason is because verse 36 seems to mark a clear transition in topics, which is what I used to hold to. And again, I'm open to coming back to this and being like, actually, I was wrong, and I was wrong about being wrong. But for now, verse 36, he says concerning that day and hour, and people go, the last thing he referenced was heaven and earth passing away in verse 35. Therefore, he's talking about that day when heaven and earth pass away, like new creation comes in, which is the end of the world, and the way God comes and brings his kingdom fully and eternally to the world, and heaven and earth collide in the Son. Yeah, that's the day he's talking about. And he says that day and hour no one knows. Right, so that's reason number 2. Verse 36 seems to mark a transition in events or a transition in topics. Hey, did you know that this entire ministry runs off the support of people like you? All of our free resources, teachings, and classes are made possible by viewers like you. So if you believe in what God is doing through this ministry and you want to help us in our mission, please consider partnering with us financially. You can give a one-time gift or become a monthly partner on our website. Our mission is to teach people how to read the Bible so they can live and teach it for themselves. And when you become a monthly supporter, you get access to exclusive content, special resources, and other perks coming soon. Visit abovereproachministry.com/donate to give however the Lord leads you. We have many other projects that we're working on that need to be funded. A mobile app for all of our courses and teachings, and other Bible courses that are in the works right now. So thank you so much for all your support and prayers. Let's get back to the video. Also, here's the third reason people often will say 2 different events in Matthew 24, is because Jesus says that day and hour no one knows, not even the Son or the angels of heaven. So they go clearly, and I used to think this way as well, because this day is something the Son and the angels don't know about, it seems to be different than the day he described up to verse 35. Verse 3 through 35, there's a bunch of signs and things to look at, and it seems like we can know that day. Verse 36 seems to be talking about a completely different day than the one he's just been describing previously, because all of a sudden, no one knows about this day or hour, which seems like a reasonable thing to conclude at first, until you actually begin reading Matthew's gospel holistically. I'm not convinced of that. I'm not convinced that verse 1 through 35 is like, hey, you can know these things, you can recognize the sign, but then he's like, but there is a day, my coming, the end of the world, where no one will know. I'm not saying we can know the day or hour of Jesus' coming. I just don't think he's necessarily referring to that in verse 36, is the day of his final return to establish new creation, okay? You're probably going to have more questions and thoughts after this. That's good. I want you guys to think through this. I'm not the ultimate source of information. I can be wrong. Just sharing where I stand for now. The fourth reason people suspect there's two separate events being described in Matthew 24 is, again, the separation in Luke's gospel. Luke 17 and Luke 21 are separate. They separate what Matthew 24 consolidates into one singular discourse. So let me just show you what I mean, okay? In Luke 17, right, the Pharisees, they come and they go, when will the kingdom of God come, right? And Jesus' answer, after he begins speaking to the disciples, it seems as though the kingdom of God is not coming in ways that can be observed. And then he elaborates to the disciples in a little more detail. The days are coming when you'll want to see the days of the Son of Man. And he goes on. Noah entered the ark. One is taken, one is left. This section right here is the end of Matthew 24. So some would go, Jesus right here is talking about the coming of the kingdom, which, is the end of the world. Because, right, so hold on to that. The Pharisees ask, when will the kingdom of God come? And then we have the answer, which is the last portion of Matthew 24. Well, in Luke 21, the disciples, talking about the destruction of the temple, and they go, teacher, when will these things be? What will be the sign these things are about to take place? So notice in Luke 21, we don't have three questions. In Matthew 24, we had three questions. When will these things be? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Kind of three separate inquiries at face value. Well, in Luke 21, we only have two. When will these things be? What will be the sign these things are about to take place? Which seems to be another way of asking about the same thing. But in Luke 17, and I know I'm just confusing you, I hope this just makes you go study. In Luke 17, we have the third inquiry that Matthew includes in his account. So just to make this very clear, if I haven't been clear, Matthew 24, three questions. Luke's account, not three questions in one discourse. You have two questions in Luke 21, and the additional one is found in Luke 17. Therefore, people conclude these are two different topics, two different events Jesus is referring to. I don't hold to that view. I'm convinced that Luke 17 and Luke 21 are likely the same event, especially considering how Jesus will say, if we're talking about the coming of the kingdom, some just assume, based on their theology and what they've inherited from people, that when the Pharisees are asking, when will the kingdom of God come, they're asking about the end of the world, or Jesus is going to answer, here's when the end of the world will come. But I want to consider what the Gospels say about the coming of the kingdom. Jesus will say, some of you will see the kingdom and the coming of the kingdom. Some of you will be alive. He'll say the kingdom of God is among you, or has come upon you, or is at hand. So it doesn't seem as though the kingdom of God necessarily coming it means the end of the world. There is going to be the full realization of the kingdom of God in new creation. We're waiting for that. I don't think that's happened. But the kingdom of God coming, or coming to the world, or being here, the way Jesus describes throughout the Gospels, I believe has happened. And I understand many will disagree with my claims, and you can share your thoughts in the comments. Be respectful, be kind. And again, eschatology, end times conversations and beliefs are not ultimate. These are not primary. We're not going to get into heaven based on what we believe about the end times. If you're a born-again believer, you believe Jesus is coming back. We believe new creation's coming. The eternal kingdom will be established, but the logistics and timing of that will vary with each view. So if in my own head, I feel like I was confusing, and I was clear in my own head, but I feel like it wasn't clear to them. So if that's the case, please ask some clarifying questions, and if I need to do a follow-up, I will. I try not to ramble, but in this case, sometimes as a teacher, if I don't think something was stated clearly, I repeat it differently at different times. That's just the teacher in me. I'm not trying to ramble. I just want to be very clear and thorough in the way I deliver these things. So again, those 4 points that people will usually hold on to say, this is why 2 separate events in Matthew 24. I don't believe that those are reasonable explanations for the whole 2-event view. I don't conclude that. Do I think it's reasonable for someone else to conclude? Sure. I just don't read the scriptures and conclude that. That's just where I'm at right now. So in the next video, we're going to begin looking at very specific details within Matthew 24 that are misconceptions. And the first thing we have to address is what I brought up earlier, the 3 questions of the disciples. One of the misconceptions is that these 3 questions are talking about 3 separate events, or at least 2 separate events. And the way Jesus answers in Matthew 24 is one section is addressing one question, the other section is addressing the other question. I don't believe that's actually correct. I'll show you why in the next video. So make sure you watch that, share this, like this, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. All right? I'll see you guys in the next video. Hey, if you're not a monthly supporter yet of this ministry, here's why you'll want to become one today. You get access to exclusive teachings every week. Right now, I'm going through Genesis, looking at the Hebrew and drawing out deeper insights. You'll get access to all of my biblical parallel worksheets. And there are other benefits for higher tiers, like unlimited access to all of my sermon notes, free access to paid Bible courses, and even early access to weekly Bible teachings. So go check that out on the website, and thank you for supporting this ministry to help us teach people how to read the Bible so they can live and teach it for themselves. I'll see you in the next video.